My stepmom requested that I engage in this activity with her. Hello, everyone. That night transformed everything in ways I could never have anticipated. It all began with a straightforward request from my stepmom, Jessica, who asked me to remain at home while my dad embarked on his regular fishing trip. In that moment, it seemed perfectly ordinary. Ultimately, it was simply the two of us on most weekends. However, I was unaware that this evening would unfold into something much more extraordinary. A night that would test the boundaries of our relationship and leave an indelible impression on me. Be sure to subscribe to my channel so I can keep sharing more captivating true stories like this one. Be sure to watch this video all the way through, as the story unfolds in a truly captivating way. The house was enveloped in an unusual stillness that morning. The absence of my dad's usual presence created an unsettling silence. I had just completed my homework and was all set to unwind when Jessica summoned me into the living room. Could you assist me with something? Her voice was gentle, somewhat overly relaxed. It was clear that she was anxious. However, I was unable to understand the reason. I paused for a moment. Absolutely. What is it that you require? I inquired. She approached the spot where she was seated. Jessica typically maintained a serene composure. Yet, today, there was an unmistakable shift in the air. She beamed, yet an intensity flickered in her eyes that set my heart racing. Please take a seat, she remarked, gently tapping the cushion beside her. I complied with her request, uncertain about what lay ahead, yet intrigued by the unfolding events. Jessica reclined. She crossed her legs and gazed at me with a newfound intensity that caught me off guard. You have matured significantly. You are aware of that, she remarked. Her tone was cheerful. Yet, the words carried a weight of hidden significance. You're no longer the young boy I once knew. My heart raced. This wasn't characteristic of her. We had always maintained a friendly rapport, easygoing connection. However, today carried an unsettling edge, I supposed. I spoke softly. Feeling uncertain about how to reply, she leaned in slightly. Her gaze remained fixed on me. Absolutely not, she was adamant. You have transformed. And I believe we are both aware of it. The manner in which she expressed it sent a chill coursing through me. A peculiar tension enveloped the room, and I was at a loss for how to shatter it. Jessica, what are you attempting to convey? I inquired, ultimately bringing the question to light. I had to grasp the situation at hand, why the atmosphere was laden with unexpressed thoughts. For a brief instant, she remained silent. She simply gazed at me, seeking the perfect words within my gaze. She let out a sigh and rose to her feet, strolling toward the window. Your father has left for the weekend, she spoke softly, gazing into the yard. Only the two of us remain in this space. I acknowledged with a nod, uncertain about the direction of this dialogue. Yet, I sense a knot tightening in my stomach. She pivoted to confront me. Her expression was a mystery. I've been pondering lately, she started. Her voice was calm yet gentle. I have some thoughts I've been eager to share with you. Thoughts I've kept to myself until this moment. I gulped. What do you mean? She moved in nearer, her gaze fixed on me. Enjoy our content, she stated plainly. The word lingered in the atmosphere, and my heart raced. What was she suggesting? This was confusing. I attempted to brush it aside with a chuckle. However, my voice emerged unsteady. What are you trying to say? We? Jessica smiled faintly. A knowing smile that sent a flutter through my stomach. You've observed it as well, have you not? She inquired. Her voice was soft and subdued. The transformation in our relationship is striking. We have evolved beyond the roles of stepmother and stepson. My thoughts were whirling, attempting to keep pace with her expressions. Yet, beneath the surface, I was fully aware of what she meant. I had sensed it as well, the delicate exchanges of looks, the subtle caresses. Yet, I consistently set those emotions aside, persuaded they didn't exist. I'm not sure I understand what you mean. I was not truthful. My voice is hardly more than a murmur. She moved in even closer. Her presence was all-consuming. And suddenly, the room seemed far too confined. Indeed, you do, she spoke in a gentle whisper. Her fingers grazed softly over my arm. You experienced it as well. I rose suddenly, moving away from her, attempting to find some clarity in my thoughts. Jessica, this is absolutely wild. I expressed, my voice quivers. You are my stepmother. We are unable to. We ought not to. However, she stood her ground. She trailed behind me, bridging the gap that separates us once more. Why not? She murmured softly, her gaze ignited with fervor. We are both grown-ups. We are free to create our own path. I shook my head, struggling to withstand the allure that was beckoning me nearer to her. No, this isn't correct. I was adamant. Even as I spoke those words, I sensed my determination faltering. But what if it truly is? She responded, her hand extended, brushing gently against my cheek. The touch sent a surge through me. For a brief instant, I found myself completely still, caught in the intricate design she was crafting around us. I intended to refuse in order to keep her close, to flee the room and erase this from memory. However, I was unable to. Something held me firmly in place, and I despised myself for it. I was unable to dispel the sensation that situations were becoming increasingly chaotic. The atmosphere in the house became increasingly oppressive each time I encountered Jessica. The unspoken words hung heavily in the air, a palpable pressure that enveloped me, choking me. However, I was unsure of how to face it or halt the gradual progression. Unavoidable force drawing us together into perilous territory. The days melded into one another. Each interaction seemed heavy with meaning. It felt as though we were treading on a knife's edge. I made an effort to maintain my space, steering clear of solitary moments with her whenever feasible. However, it was not simple. She always managed to stay near, to assert her presence. Whether it was a light brush against the arm, or the way she gazed at me from across the room, it was perpetually present, this lingering tension that would not dissipate. Then came the night when everything transformed. My father was working late into the night, and I was attempting to remain secluded in my room, wishing that if I kept my distance from her for a while, everything would return to the way it was. Yet, beneath the surface, I was certain that wouldn't come to pass. I could hear her bustling about downstairs, the echo of the television softly murmuring in the background. The clock ticked audibly on my wall. Every second feels like an eternity, creating a challenge to overlook the truth. I considered reaching out to a friend, creating a reason to depart. Yet, an invisible force held me back from reaching for the phone. Rather, I stood outside my room, attuning to the stillness that enveloped the house. The silence was overwhelming, too quiet. And that was the moment I chose a path that would alter the course of my life forever. I descended the stairs. Every step weighed down more than the one before. Jessica sat on the couch, a glass of wine cradled in her hand. Her gaze wandered, lost in thought as she fixated on the flickering screen of the TV. Initially, she overlooked my presence. Or perhaps she did, but feigned otherwise. I paused at the foot of the staircase, feeling uncertain about how to express myself or what actions to take, but then she raised her gaze. Our gazes intertwined, and I realized there was no way to go back. Unable to find rest, she inquired. Her voice was gentle, somewhat overly relaxed. There was a certain quality in her voice that sent my heart racing, just like it did on that very first day. Indeed, I spoke softly. I find it difficult to express myself further. I strolled over to the couch and settled in, creating as much distance between us as we can. Yet, despite that distance, the tension hung in the air, palpable and unvoiced. We lingered in quietude for a brief while. The sole sound was the soft hum of the television. I sensed her gaze upon me. Her gaze held on to me, sending a shiver across my skin. I was at a loss for what to do. I was at a loss for how to shatter the stillness without complicating matters further. Yet, just as I was about to speak, she uttered another word. I've been reflecting on our connection. She spoke in a gentle whisper. Her voice was scarcely more than a whisper. My heart raced with a sudden thrill. Jessica, we are unable to. I began, however. She interrupted me before I had the chance to complete my thought. Why not? She inquired, turning to confront me completely. Why are we acting as if there's nothing between us when we both understand that there is? Her words struck me deeply. I felt compelled to engage in a debate, to inform her that she had made an error, that we were unable to pursue this route. However, the reality was I lacked the strength to resist it any longer. I had sensed it as well. The peculiar attraction between us had only intensified. I attempted to overlook it, persuade myself it wasn't genuine. However, at this moment, here I am, sitting with her. I could no longer ignore it. This is not something we can accomplish, I expressed. Even though my voice was devoid of certainty, as I spoke, I was aware they were falsehoods. She leaned in closer. Her hand lay gently on the cushion that separated us. We aren't making any mistakes, she murmured. Her voice was deep and filled with passion. We aren't causing any harm to anyone. I shook my head, attempting to dispel the haze that has enveloped my mind. However, it isn't fair. I presented my case with little conviction. She extended her hand and rested it gently on mine, her touch igniting a surge of energy within me. Who determines what is right and what is wrong? She inquired. Her eyes remained fixed on me. I gulped. My heart is racing. I felt the urge to distance myself and urge her to cease. However, I was unable to. I found myself completely immobilized, confined by the instant, by the emotions I had been suppressing for so long. We are free to create our own path, she murmured. Her fingers danced lightly, creating delicate patterns on the back of my hand. We have the power to determine what is right for ourselves. I shut my eyes, attempting to silence her voice, the sensation of her caress. However, it proved to be futile. The barriers I had constructed to shield myself were beginning to fall apart, and I was at a loss for how to bring it to a halt. Before I had the chance to speak, before I could muster the courage to break free, she drew nearer. Her lips grazed my ear as she murmured softly, "Share with me that you don't sense it either." Her words sent a chill coursing through me, and I despised how intensely my body reacted to her, how much I longed to contribute. I began to voice my objections, to convey to her that this was incorrect, that we were unable to accomplish this. Yet, no words emerged. Alternatively, I turned to face her. My breath caught in my throat as our eyes locked. The moment lingered endlessly. The tension between us thickens with every passing second. And then, unconsciously, unplanned, I leaned in and kissed her. Initially, it was gentle, uncertain. I felt as if we were both exploring the depths cautiously, uncertain about what might come next. But the kiss swiftly intensified. The intensity between us surged as we surrendered to the longing that had been simmering for ages. My hands gently settled on her waist, drawing her nearer as her fingers wove through my hair. The surroundings faded away, leaving only silence. Only the two of us remained, enveloped in the intensity of the moment. I was aware it was not right. We understood that we were stepping over a boundary from which there would be no return. Yet, I found myself unable to halt. I was reluctant to bring it to an end. As the kiss intensified, my thoughts surged, a whirlwind of contradictions swirling within me. I was aware of the risks involved, understood that we were toying with danger. Yet, there existed a fragment of my being that felt indifferent, a fragment that had yearned for this far longer than I was prepared to acknowledge. When we ultimately separated, we were both panting heavily, our faces mere inches apart. Her gaze was deep and mysterious, filled with an indescribable essence. And I realized that our relationship would never return to what it once was. "This has been my desire for an eternity," she murmured softly. Her breath lingered, warm against my skin. "And I understand you have as well." I chose not to respond. I was unable to. The reality was overwhelming for me to bear, excessively daunting. Rather, I simply nodded. My heart raced as the gravity of our recent actions enveloped me. However, even at that time, I understood it wasn't finished. The kiss was merely the start. There was more. There would always be more. Following that evening, all dynamics shifted between us. My perception of Jessica had irrevocably changed. Each time our gazes intertwined, a wave of warmth surged through me. A gentle nudge of our past actions and the silent vow of possibilities yet to unfold. The atmosphere within the house felt electrified, as if it held a lurking peril. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a truth we both recognized yet chose not to confront directly. Days went by, filled with intensity. Uncomfortable stillness. I maintained my distance as much as possible, yet it was unavoidable to escape her entirely, each stroke of her hand. Each fleeting look seemed to carry a charge, poised to set ablaze the underlying tension that lingered just out of sight. I understood that what was unfolding was not justifiable, yet an undeniable attraction lingered between us that I couldn't overlook, no matter how hard I attempted. One afternoon, while my father was away once more, the stillness in the house was suffocating. I found myself pacing the living room. I'm attempting to divert my attention with the television. Yet, my mind continually wandered back to her. The recollection of that kiss. The sensation of her lips pressed softly against mine, the way my heart had quickened. It was overwhelming. I despised myself for even considering it, yet I found myself unable to cease. Just when I believed I could lose my sanity, I heard her footsteps behind me. I turned to see Jessica standing in the doorway. Her expression was a mystery, for a brief instant. Not a word was exchanged between us. The atmosphere between us was charged, burdened by all that remains unspoken. We should have a conversation. She finally spoke. Her voice was soft and subdued, somewhat reluctant. I acknowledged with a nod, understanding that this dialogue was bound to happen, even if I wasn't prepared for it. Indeed, I concurred. My throat feels constricted. We certainly do. She strolled over to the couch, settling in with a deep breath. I pursued, positioned opposite her, maintaining a thoughtful separation. My heart raced within my chest, and I found it difficult to look her in the eye. I was uncertain about how to begin. I was at a loss for words that could improve any of this. I understand that circumstances have changed. She started. Her hands rested gently in her lap. I want you to feel at ease. That's the final thing I desire. I gulped it. My mouth is dry. I am uncertain about my emotions. I confessed. My voice barely rises above a whisper. Well, you see, this is not typical. Isn't that so? We aren't meant to experience these emotions. Jessica gazed at her hand. Her expression was one of concern. I understand. She spoke in a gentle whisper. However, it's not an issue we can simply overlook. Is it possible for us to do that? I found myself without a response for her. The reality was, I was uncertain about what our next step should be. Everything seemed off, however, concurrently, was unable to make sense of it. Yet, the emotions were undeniably present, inarguable and authentic. She adjusted her position on the couch, inclining a bit forward. I often reflect on that night, she admitted. Her voice was scarcely more than a murmur. I can't get it out of my mind. My breath seized in my throat. I wanted to express to her that I had considered it as well. It lingered in my thoughts, shadowing every moment of my day. Yet, I found myself unable to utter the words. Rather, I simply nodded. My heart is racing. A lengthy pause lingered in the air between us. Burdened by the unspoken truths that lingered between us, the tension was palpable, rising once more. The very perilous attraction that had initially guided us along this route. And then, before I could hold back, I stated, I ponder that as well. The words slipped from my lips before I had a chance to retract them. And once they were uttered, they were irreversible. Jessica's gaze lifted to connect with mine. And in that moment, I understood that there was no turning back. We had crossed a line. And now we found ourselves poised on the brink of something far more perilous. Initially, she remained silent, yet the expression in her eyes revealed all that I required to understand. There was a warmth there, a necessity that reflected my own, and it filled me with dread. However, concurrently, it thrilled me in a way I couldn't ignore. This cannot continue, I stated. My voice trembles, even as I expressed it. I found myself questioning its validity. Jessica's eyes remained fixed on me. I understand, she murmured. However, we are already present, are we not? The space seemed cramped. The atmosphere is suffocating. I felt the urge to argue create as much separation between us as I can. Yet, I found myself unable to shift. I found myself ensnared. Not by her, however, according to my own wishes. The attraction between us was undeniable, simply irresistible. Before I realized what was unfolding, she leaned in, her face is mere inches from mine. I sensed her breath against my skin, cozy and gentle, and my heart raced within me. For a brief moment, I believed I could intervene, to withdraw and conclude this before it progressed any further. But then her lips met mine, and all logical reasoning vanished. The kiss felt distinct this time. It was confident and resolute. It was brimming with the tension we had been suppressing, the yearning that had been growing for such an extended period. I kissed her back instinctively. My hands lay gently on the couch, clutching the material to maintain my sense of stability. It wasn't centered on love or affection. It was about necessity, a fierce, consuming desire that neither of us could contain. My pulse quickened. My mind swirled with elusive thoughts I couldn't quite capture. All I understood was that in this instant, there was no turning back. When we finally separated, we were both out of breath, our foreheads touching gently, a moment of connection. The burden of our recent actions lingered palpably in the atmosphere. Yet, neither of us made a move to disrupt the stillness of the moment. We must put an end to this, I repeated myself once more. Even though my voice lacked strength, devoid of certainty, Jessica gave a slight nod. Her breath lingered, warm upon my skin. I understand, she murmured softly. Yet, it feels incredibly challenging. I asked it not. I chose not to reply. Silence enveloped the moment, leaving no words to be spoken. We found ourselves ensnared in the intricate tapestry we had crafted. Yet, despite all our reassurances that we should cease, the magnetic force between us continually drew us back into each other's orbit. And that was the moment it all changed. She leaned closer to me once more, and we found it impossible to resist. Everything unfolded in an instant, and as thrilling as it was for me, she appeared indifferent. Once it had concluded, she offered me a smile. She informed me that she really enjoyed it. The subsequent days unfolded in a haze. We endeavored to maintain a sense of normalcy, attempted to act as if nothing had transpired. Yet, the tension that lingered between us was unmistakable. Each moment I laid eyes on her, I experienced that same surge of warmth, the same perilous attraction. It felt as though we were orbiting around one another, anticipating the instant when we would ultimately surrender once more. And I understood it was merely a question of time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the evening unfolded. When my father was out late for work, I discovered myself in the kitchen. I'm attempting to occupy my mind by preparing dinner, yet the stillness and the silence in the house was overwhelming. I found it impossible to concentrate. Each sound resonated in the air, bringing to mind the significance of our actions. Initially, I was unaware of her entrance. However, when I spun around, there she stood, resting against the doorframe, observing me with that same inscrutable look. "Require any assistance?" she inquired. Her voice was relaxed, yet there was an undercurrent that sent my heart racing. "No. I'm doing well." I spoke, even as my hands trembled. She approached me with a purposeful stride, too close for comfort. Her presence was all-consuming. "Are you certain?" I gulped, attempting to understand myself. "Jessica, we are unable to I began. However, she interrupted me. "We are not obligated to take any action." She spoke in a gentle whisper. Her gaze was fixed on me. "However, I believe we are both aware of the direction this is heading." The words lingered in the air between us, weighty and conclusive. I felt compelled to engage in a debate, felt compelled to express that she was mistaken, yet I found myself unable to, for deep within, she was undeniably correct. We remained there, enveloped in quietude. The distance that separates us diminishes with each fleeting moment. And then, before I realized it, she was kissing me once more. It happened swiftly, nearly ephemeral. Yet, it was sufficient to rekindle all that we had been striving to suppress. My heart raced within me, and I realized that this was merely the start. The days that came after were a haze of captured instances and ephemeral looks. It felt as though I was existing in two distinct realms. One where everything appeared to be just as it should, and another where Jessica and I were perpetually teetering on the brink of something beyond our grasp. The burden of our secret felt immense, yet we found it impossible to keep our distance. No matter how often I reassured myself that it had to come to an end. We had to put an end to IT. IT continued to occur each time my father departed for work or lingered out late. The tension between us intensified. I would discover myself in the same room as her, silently, without uttering a single word. We both understood what was about to unfold. It was chilling how effortlessly we had fallen into this. Each caress, each glance seemed to carry the weight of crossing an unseen boundary. Still, it was never sufficient to cause either of us to retreat. Alternatively, we were pulled nearer to one another. It felt as though an unseen force, greater than ourselves, was leading us along this journey. It was a Saturday afternoon. The atmosphere within the house felt particularly heavy. My father was attending a company event and wouldn't return until late. I sensed the change the instant I opened my eyes that morning. The hushed expectancy that had grown all too commonplace, as the minutes slipped away. I couldn't rid myself of the sensation that an event was on the verge of unfolding. It's an experience from which we could never truly recover. Jessica occupied the kitchen as I entered. She stood at the sink, washing dishes, her back turned to me. Yet, she must have sensed my presence, for she showed no sign of surprise as I stepped inside. I lingered by the door, observing her for a brief moment, feeling uncertain about how to express myself, and I was all too familiar with the steps. She switched off the faucet and dried her hands with a towel before turning to face me. For a moment, neither of us uttered a word. The quiet was deafening, brimming with all the unspoken words. "Are you all right?" she inquired. Her voice was gentle. Her gaze seeks out my own. I was not. I hadn't been for a while. But how could I possibly confess that? How can I articulate the tempest swirling within me? The ongoing struggle between good and evil. I'm uncertain. I finally responded. My voice was hardly heard. This file exceeds a duration of 30 minutes. Experience limitless possibilities with TurboCRIB.ai, where you can transcribe files that are up to 10 hours in length.